If you've been following this channel, you've probably seen one of my several Total War reviews, where I take deep dives into the various games and present my opinion on them after all these years. In this video though, I thought we'd do something just a little bit different. This is a massive ranking of every Total War game I've ever played, dating all the way back to the first Rome. And if that sounds good to you, I really hope you leave a like and a comment down below. Before we begin, I just want to make a few things clear. These are obviously my opinions, and if you either agree or disagree with any tiers, do let me know down below. Second, I do believe it's possible to recognize that one game is better than another, while still preferring the latter. This is called being able to reflect and have nuance and recognize one's own preferences, and I think that's a very good thing indeed. Lastly, these games can be judged by several factors, and in this ranking, I will be taking many of these into account. This means that older titles that were perfect for their time might not be as highly rated all these years later. In that sense then, I am ranking these games without mods based on a mix of today's standards and the quality of the game itself to my own assured detriment. And now then, let's go! First up is Rome Total War, the mad lad who for me came out of nowhere and introduced this series to me. Rome will always hold a special place in my heart for nostalgic reasons, but it's of course a wonderful game in its own right. Its visuals continue to mesmerize all these years later, although the unit animations in particular leave much to be desired now. The battles were the most awesome thing back in the day, and to some degree managed to hold up to this day. What's aged even better is the campaign though, which is rather timeless honestly. From managing generals to taxation, populations and the Senate and people of Rome, to playing factions all over the world, Rome still offers an awesome campaign. And now for the bloody part. If this was 2004, Rome would easily deserve an S tier. However, going back to Rome right now is a rather jarring experience in terms of AI, unit pathfinding, and general quality of life controls and mechanics. In some ways it's better than some of the modern Total Wars, but in other ways it's much worse. So as much as this game deserves an S tier in its day, I think I'm forced to put Rome on a B tier for today's standard. I know this hurts guys, but I'll carry our collective cross for that one. Ooh, next up is none other than the great Medieval II Total War, boy, the one where the Germans say Kaiser with every breath.
Ja, Kaiser. Mein Kaiser? We shall defeat them for you, mein Kaiser. Erecting defensive fortifications, mein Kaiser.
Medieval II not only updated Rome's visuals, but took on its legacy in every sense of the word. The campaign map was made more complex with all-encompassing church mechanics for every Catholic nation, which include a cardinal, excommunication, and crusades mechanic. Muslims got to go on jihad, while the Byzantines were there to just take it all. But the battles are where Medieval II really feels like a massive step up from Rome. The visuals pop significantly more, and the animations are still world-class to this day. They just feel so organic and awesome, and whether playing vanilla or a mod, Medieval II battles honestly remain some of the best in the series. Factor in the awesome soundtrack, and you have a game that feels like it's hardly aged except for perhaps the UI. Medieval II still holds up to this day due to various quality of life enhancements since Rome, even including a genius hot seat mechanic, and all these years later, it still deserves an S tier. It's kind of weird to think about that Empire came out right after Medieval, because where Medieval has that aura of the golden past around it, Empire is such a step up in terms of gameplay feel and graphics, while so much else is a massive step down. Empire offers a truly awesome campaign with an almost worldwide scope, more factions than ever, technology trees, and my favorite part, the towns dotting the map, which made it feel so much more alive. On the flip side, you had one province, France, no family tree and no dynamic events, which made the campaign in some ways feel like a big step back. The battles went from top to bottom tier depending on the circumstance, offering a cool new way to wage war with guns and cannons or even the all new naval battles, but also falling short in terms of AI and some truly awful siege battles. Empire is a good game despite its many flaws and lacks, but deserves no higher place than a C tier. Now Napoleon fixed almost every major issue Empire had, while polishing the visuals and performance. It included several campaigns that each offered different objectives and gameplay styles, but lacked that massive grand campaign of Empire, even though the Europe campaign map was beautiful and exciting. Its limited scope definitely had its shortcomings, like less of a focus on population growth and domination of the seas, but Napoleon made up for that in polished and even better battles, where both sights, sounds, and the general feel was vastly improved. And because of this, and because it still looks and feels amazing, Napoleon is a definite A tier. After Napoleon came Shogun II, a return to feudal Japan and the more old-style sword and bow combat. Japan was larger than ever, offering a detailed map with small towns and larger cities, a whole new general upgrade system, a hard late game challenge, and some awesome battles. Shogun II felt so good to play, and it holds up really well by being hard, tactical, and visually pleasing. The UI is one of my favorite parts, being so minimalistic and easy to use. To me though, Shogun II lacked a multiplayer campaign that didn't desync, a better soundtrack for the campaign, and I would have liked some deeper mechanics. But other than that, Shogun II is wonderful, making this title also fully deserving of an A tier. Shogun II Fall of the Samurai is its own independent game like Napoleon is, and will be considered as such for this rating. Fall of the Samurai completely revamps the campaign, moving the timeline up to the 19th century and into an age of guns and steam. Using Shogun II as a basis for its mechanics, Fall of the Samurai innovates with navies that are actually usable as support on the campaign map and transport trains, both of which are completely awesome. But once again are the battles what Shogun II does best, and Fall of the Samurai, by offering old-style samurai and new line infantry and rapid-fire cannons, offer perhaps the best battles in the series, baffling me with their epicness even now. Fall of the Samurai is without a doubt an S-tier Total War game, and a perfect independent expansion at that. Now comes a controversial one. Rome 2 began as a mess, competing with Empire for the most botched Total War release ever. But over the years, Rome 2 got patched, expanded with expansions, and CA managed to make it a decent game in the end. Rome 2 is awesome for its absolute enormous campaign, number of factions, units, and diversity in both. Even the battles feel good and dynamic now, and look visually stunning, despite not offering the same quality in unit collision as the likes of Medieval 2. Rome 2 lacks a lot in my opinion, namely deeper mechanics which make the game feel like something more than just an arcade game. That's the main reason Rome 2 has aged poorly in my opinion. Rome 2 lands on a B tier then, conveniently the same as the first Rome in the series despite being much more modern. And here comes the boy, the man, the absolute unit, Attila. Total War Attila takes place in the dark ages of the fall of the Western Roman Empire, and this is a truly dynamic game in every sense of the word. Attila offers the largest starting factions Total War has ever seen, while offering the smallest factions, some even without cities entirely, known as horde factions. It's a game of opposites, of attack and defense, of massing battles pitting organized legions against barbarians and Eastern empires, and an overall vibe of desperation and difficulty. But where Attila truly shines is in its deep campaign mechanics. Learning from the mistakes of Rome 2, Attila offers a unique governor mechanic, a deep family tree, and an awesome fertility mechanic that determines the value of the land. Attila is a near perfect modern Total War game, lacking perhaps only a more varied soundtrack and proper performance, which makes this game harder to run than most. Despite the performance though, Attila is such a Total War diamond that it more than deserves the S tier and title of one of the finest Total War games ever made. Now then, we've reached a point in this video where things kind of change, at least for me. The Warhammer games mark a shift in Total War because of the move away from historical settings and attempts at realism to more action and arcade-based gameplay. To some, Total War has never been better, but to others, it's never been worse. It's a hard dynamic to maneuver, but for me, it's all a mixed bag. Because this is a series that's so linked, I'm going to rank them all in the same batch. Warhammer 1 is honestly perhaps my favorite in the series because it seemed to not overly rely on magic and supernatural fantasy stuff. It offered decent gameplay with a good mix of history-inspired armies and classical fantasy factions like elves and dwarves, but in my opinion left a lot to be desired in terms of depth. I miss the governors from Attila, I miss fertility, population mechanics, and so much more. The mechanics I want, which mostly deal with statecraft, has in the Warhammer games largely been replaced by faction-specific mechanics. This is all well and good on its own, but the fact that the faction-specific mechanics are more or less everything on offer in terms of micromanaging is to me a big bummer. Warhammer 1 is perhaps the simplest of the games, but to me, this made it more realistic and easy to get into, and that meant a lot. Warhammer 2 offered a much larger scope, especially in terms of the Mortal Empires campaign and an explosion in playable factions and environments, and is almost universally loved by the fans for these reasons. Warhammer 3 is the latest and perhaps last game in the series, and while it has yet to offer the largest Mortal Empires campaign yet, delivers a campaign which is contested and not really loved by that many. To me, Warhammer 3 is a lot more fun than Warhammer 2, essentially because it feels like a return to the more realistic sense of Warhammer 1 by way of Kislev and Cathay, while offering that supernatural feeling with all these chaos factions around. Once Mortal Empires comes, I'm sure it will pick up steam again in the community, but that remains to be seen. Warhammer 1 then lands on a B tier for me, as it is a quality game. Warhammer 2, and you'll probably hate me for this, lands on the C tier, largely because I was underwhelmed by the visuals, did not relate to any of the factions, and thought the magic and supernatural stuff took way over the sense of strategy and state management. It felt more hollow to me as a non-Warhammer fan, but I do recognize that the Mortal Empires campaign is awesome. Warhammer 3 though is once again elevated to the B tier, as I find the factions to be interesting, the campaign to be astonishing, and the battles to both look and feel better than in Warhammer 2. The bugs and performance issues do put a big hamper on this game right now though, but I do trust those will be fixed shortly and in anticipation of the Mortal Empires campaign. With Warhammer done, it's time for something quite different, namely Thrones of Britannia. And here's the thing about this game. The ideas behind it were awesome, taking a deeper look at the Viking Age in Britain and implementing some potentially interesting mechanics. But to me, both the look, feel, and gameplay of this game just never materialized. I find Thrones to be washed out and boring, and what little it offers in terms of enjoyment just doesn't matter because the game feels like a lesser version of Attila, even to the point of looking exactly the same. Thrones of Britannia then lands on a D tier. Then we have Three Kingdoms, the only Total War taking place in China and the first in the series to attempt a combination of historical and fantasy elements. Three Kingdoms is another massive title with a bunch of different factions, but what it did better than any Total War before it was diplomacy, which finally innovated and made the feature reliable, understandable, and tactical. Now we could see exactly how likely a deal was to go through, and like Warhammer, factions had unique features that differentiated them from others. Despite the innovations though, I never managed to find 3K as interesting or exciting as I hoped for, partially owed to a less than optimal UI, a map that felt more or less the same wherever you were, and to me, an uninteresting setting. The battles of 3K are some of the best in the series though, both looking and feeling really satisfying, but contrary to Shogun II, which managed to pull off a mostly samey looking unit roster, doesn't really manage to do so, making at least me feel like I'm mostly playing around with peasant armies for the most of the game. Three Kingdoms then lands on a C tier for me. Lastly, the final major Total War game to be released when not counting Warhammer is a Total War Saga Troy. The fact that this game was an Epic Store exclusive for a full year, and the fact that its mantra of being something in between history and myth, probably made this less than an optimal title for the community. But to me, Troy is awesome, beautiful, massive, and interesting due to a number of factors. The campaign here is the best part, offering one of Total War's best and most wonderfully painted user interfaces, along with completely unique faction mechanics, a new resource and trade system which favors goods over money, and a diplomacy system heavily inspired by Three Kingdoms. The battles are a mixed bag, and while I feel like it lacks a lot when it comes to unit ability formations and a real sense of battle, the battle maps themselves are some of the most interesting in the series. To me then, Troy is a wonderfully mixed bag, and despite its shortcomings, land at the powerful A tier. One more title needs to be ranked though, and even though it's not a new IP, Roammaster is a new game all the same. It updates the visuals and some of the mechanics of the original Rome. I really like Roammaster, and even though it lacks certain AI and pathfinding polishing, it makes up for it in a Rome Total War that is actually playable on modern hardware. I lament the fact that it doesn't add a multiplayer campaign though, and certain aspects related to the battle maps especially do feel outdated. But other than that, it's a fun title and deserves the same ranking as the original Rome, a B tier. And with that, we have the complete list of ranked Total War games. Whether a higher or lower tier game, I think each of these games have something different to offer, although the S and A ranked tier games are obviously a lot more fun, immersive, and varied than the ones below. I have sung the praises of Medieval II, Attila, and Fall of the Samurai on this channel, and so it might not come as a big shock that I ranked them the highest. I think the biggest potential disappointment is the original Rome, and I must again stress that it lands on a B because playing it today just feels outdated and kind of jaggy, despite being my first Total War game and one of my most beloved. Thank you so much for watching. Again, remember that this is a list based on the vanilla campaign experiences of each game, and mods have not been included in this calculation. That might be another ranking for another day, but right now, you need to give me your list and tell me exactly what you think of mine. If you enjoyed the video, I really hope you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon, where every donation means the world to me. Make sure to join us over on Discord as well. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.